Are you looking to improve your sales without resorting to pushy tactics? Welcome to Sales Made Easy, the podcast that helps you to achieve better sales results and gain long-lasting clients through relational selling. Let's get right into it. You're in a environment where you sell a little bit higher ticket item than a lot of people do, but are you running across the same challenge there about deals getting stuck?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's probably more, productive, but it's across the board, right? I have clients in all different sectors, and everybody has this problem, right?
Yeah.
So there's a fundamental number of things that actually cause deals to stick, and once you understand what they are, it's a lot easier to get them on stick.
Yeah, exactly. And would you say that no decision is kind of getting a deal stuck when it seems like you lost to the no decision after you spent months and months with somebody?
Actually, no decision is statistically the biggest competitor that there is out
Yeah,
there. 40
okay.
per 60% of all sales actually end in no decision. So what that means is that no decision effectively doubles the cost of any given sale and also wastes about half of every salesperson's time, right? So it's a very big problem out there. But in fact, I worked with a client once, you'll laugh at this, and in
Okay.
their CRM where they kept track of all their opportunities, they actually had a stage that was called stuck. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, well, that's where we put the deals, that we don't know what to do with them, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, stuck is not a stage in the sales cycle. It's not supposed to happen. So
It's not
that's
supposed to be a stage
no,
anyway.
yeah, even though it happens.
Oh my goodness. So let's get right into this here, James. One of the things that I think that people miss out on is really who are they spending time with? And you mentioned in the book your ICP or your ideal client profile. Some people might refer to this as their avatar. Could you briefly explain why this could be a problem as to why deals get stuck?
Yes, actually. So you'll laugh at this, right? Because when
Okay.
we talked before, it was all about perfect close, right? But I had a client ask me one time, I said, hey, what is the single biggest thing you can do to improve sales? And I'm thinking, oh, that's a hard question, right? And as an author on a best-selling book on closing, you might think my answer would be closing, but it isn't.
Yeah.
The single most effective thing you can do in sales is to actually sell to only ideal candidates. That's what the data shows, right? And the reason for that is because everything else is downstream from that. And so no amount of brilliant messaging or computer automation or even brute force effort can compensate for selling to the wrong person, right? Because when you're selling to the wrong person, all of your efforts end up falling on deaf ears. So it's just garbage in, garbage out. Um, and I would say probably one of the biggest crimes in all of selling, perhaps all of business, is just selling to the wrong prospects, because selling to the wrong prospects, literally, it's the biggest waste of time ever. They have the most objections. They have the slowest, longest sales cycles. They have the lowest margins and commissions. So the biggest headaches after the sales. In a lot of cases, they even become anti-references. I don't know. Have you ever had an account you wish you regret that you sold
Oh,
it?
anyone who's been in sales for any length of time says, "Yeah, I've got some chuckling going on here when you're saying all that." It's like, "Yep,
Yeah. So if you think of Pareto, right? So 20% of our opportunities are going to consume about 80% of our time. So it's like critical that we make sure that the 20% that we're spending our time, that are sucking up 80% of our time are ideal candidates that really have a high probability of closing. And so I'll tell you a funny thing that I see as a manager, and maybe your audience doesn't know, you know, th- um, while I'm an author of 3 books, I have a day job. I manage a sales force, right?
mm,
And so I deal with this day in and day out,
mhm,
just like everybody else that's listening to this. And I'll tell you a challenge that I see over and over as a sales manager, and when I go and consult, I see a rep that will engage anything that moves, whether it's good or bad, right? And then in this downward spiral, they keep pouring valuable time into these
oh
really
my
weak
goodness,
prospects. And then and I would say that's especially true for like new reps that don't know what an
mhm,
ideal customer looks like. But they're so desperate to get something into their pipeline and prove that they were a good hire, they'll go after anything. And then what happens is they get towards the end of the sales cycle, and then these all their deals have stalled out. And that's when they call me and they say, James, could you tell us the magic thing that I could say that would turn this bad prospect into a good one? And the answer is, I can't. It can't happen. It's not possible.
Yeah.
You have to apply some discipline at the beginning of the process to protect your time, so you're not wasting all that time. So you only want to work with good prospects and refuse to work with weak prospects, and instead invest that time going after the good ones. And so you're better off finding an ideal prospect than continuing to waste time on non-ideal customers. So I know, think about that for a second. Let that sink in, because it's tough medicine, right? Even though you've got an engaged prospect on the line, if it's not an ideal prospect, you're really better off making them a lower priority and going out and find one that is a really great match, because that's a better use of your time. So it's a little bit about shifting your effort from engaging, which we all think is probably a lot more fun, to prospecting, which most salespeople and entrepreneurs think is, they consider it less fun. And
Yeah.
so the highest leverage use of your time is just focus on ideal high probability prospects to begin with. And so getting that one principle right, which is all about targeting, which is what your question was, that alone, all by itself, can make you massively successful. And the reason for that is because focusing on an ideal high probability prospect is statistically the highest leverage strategy that there is that you can play, period. That's what the data shows. All other strategies are downstream from that one. They're all depending on it. So that kind of begs the question, which is, I think, where you were going, is, well, how do I know what an ideal customer looks like,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's an important question. And it's so important that I actually devoted an entire appendix. I didn't want it to dominate the book, so I just put it at the back in an
Mhm.
appendix on how to identify your ideal customer profile. Okay.
Beautiful.
And I can give you a really simple formula right here. I mean, there's a much more detailed one in the book,
Yeah,
but
well, let's go with it.
a very
Yeah.
simple formula is, if you've already got some clients, then list out your top clients and then look for common attributes between them. And you're going to look for demographics. These are measurable things. How many employees, how much revenue, things like that, right? It's measurable stuff that we can find in a database somewhere. And then you're going to use psychographics. And psychographics are kind of like, well, what's their attitude towards growth? Or what's their attitude towards, this, that, or the other thing, the economy, things like that. And those are a little harder to come by. You can't usually find those in a database somewhere. But there is some
Mhm.
AI tools out there that claim to be able to help you with some of that. Um, but if you look at the commonalities between all your best clients, you'll start to see a pattern. And then you can use that to define sort of a demographic and a psychographic profile. And then the third thing you want to do is do what it's called a problem inventory. And a problem inventory is a list of all the problems that you solve for clients. And if you want to think about it this way, problems are like markets. Okay.
Mm.
So, and that, what that means is, okay, now you've defined all your problems. So now all you need to do is find who has that problem and who has that problem in the biggest way. Those are, and so you match that with the other things we did, and boom, you've got an ideal customer profile. Now, there's a step-by-step way of doing it in the book, but that's a very simple way of getting your head around, oh, this is how I could figure out who's good and who's not good. So that you eliminate the one you regret. Yeah, you can, like, oh, I can tell this is going to be one of those high maintenance clients right from the beginning. Maybe I should spend my time elsewhere, right? But um, just to give you an idea how impactful that whole strategy is, there's a company out there called Hillrom. Some people might be familiar with it. They're in the healthcare space, which I spend a lot of time in, and they make beds and furniture, in healthcare.
Mhm.
And it's now a kind of a famous case study. You can go find it in Harvard Business Review. But just by changing the accounts that their sales team were focusing on, literally nothing else, didn't change their CRM, didn't change their market, didn't change anything. All they did is they changed which accounts their sales team focused on. They added $70 million in revenue. It increased their product margin by about 7%. It increased their operating income by 51%. It actually lowered their cost by 1%, and
Mm.
it improved their customer satisfaction by 6%. And they literally didn't do anything else except for change who their sales team targeted and chose to focus on. So targeting the right customer makes a massive difference. They're more profitable, they're easier to sell, and they're much happier. And by the way, they're much more fun to sell. So that's what I want for everybody who's listening to this episode.
So good. And to take a few notes or to get your book and find this where it's mapped out a little bit more would be super helpful. And it's worth the effort. I mean, right here, what you just described as the outcome of this healthcare or healthcare furniture company, that in itself should be enough to say, I need to spend a little time doing this. It might feel like busy work, but it's laying the foundation. In the very beginning, I mean, you may not do this in the very beginning. If you're a small business owner, you may not even know about this. But once you find out and you have a few clients, you can look at and say, yeah, they're a pain in the neck. They're always demanding. They never pay on time. That's not your ideal client profile. You want to look to some degree for people that are going to look for a partner. Someone's there to look for their interests. They're not going to nickel and dime you on everything. They're not going to expect exorbitant response time on weekends and at night, that if you're doing some kind of service, they're probably going to be more reasonable. They might ask, but they're probably going to be reasonable. So even simple things like that can help identify your ICP.
And
Thoughts on that?
yeah, and once you've taken the time to do it, it actually doesn't take that long to do, right? I mean, you could do it on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and just a couple of hours, right? Um, but if you do that, then what happens is you end up protecting a ton of your time, and you'll end up having more time because you'll recognize when you're looking at someone that's, oh wow, this is probably not a best fit for me. And then if you want to take that even one level further, you can actually set up relationships, because just because they're not a good fit for you doesn't mean they're not a good fit for somebody else. So you can have a trading relationship with someone else who specializes in people that work at XYZ company, or people that have a
Mm.
certain kind of problem. And you can say, hey, this is not really my wheelhouse. I'll give you an example of this. So I had a client come to me that did marble surfaces. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they sold marble surfaces for putting into businesses and homes and stuff. And it's a great business. And they told me about their model, and I learned all about it. And I said, this is really not a perfect fit for what I do, to, the kind of
Yeah.
consulting work I do, but I know exactly who does do this. And I recommended Lee Sauls, who's one of my friends, I'm sure
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and
Yep.
he did the work for them because he does. He did the same thing for doors and other industries like that. And I said, this is the guy that can do the best work for you. And so it's good for you because it protects your time, but at the same time, you're going to get a little reciprocity, right? And then every now
Yeah.
and then, at least sends me one that's a healthcare one, right? And so that can work, but it protects your time. The main reason we're doing an ICP is because we want to close the majority of the deals we're messing with. And if we're going to invest a lot of time, we want to make sure we got a high probability of closure, and that it's going to be worthwhile when we do, that it's making enough money.
Exactly. And so just laying the groundwork here, like I love what you said, only could take a couple of hours to do this. But once you have that done, then it kind of changes the game as to who you're looking for. Then you can say, well, where are these people? Where are these businesses? And now you can target a little more accurately, or a lot more accurately. So even though we're talking about unsticking deals, you can minimize the number of deals that get stuck first. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is being in the right pond so that you're minimizing the tiny fish that you don't want, or the bigger fish that you don't want, whatever. You want to find the right type of fish. And that's all part of this.
Yeah,
Um,
let me put that in context, though,
sure.
because there's only three things that cause deals to get stuck. People are surprised by that. It's
Okay.
either sales issues, client indecision, or business case issues. It's going to always be one of those three things. And inside of sales issues, there's five main things that represent the vast majority of all stalls. And the number one of that is selling to the wrong client, right?
Mm.
Is that you're trying to sell something that you're not a good fit to. And so you're having to work extra hard. They realize it's not a perfect match. And so you're both sort of struggling. If you just understand what your ideal customer profile looks like, every single customer will be a very pleasant experience, because it's a perfect match for what you do.
Yeah, beautiful. What would you say would be a sign that you're talking to the wrong prospect here?
Oh, there's tons. It depends on the industry a little bit, but I mean, if they ask for a service or a capability that is not an offer, is not something you do, just acknowledge that. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, some people haven't decided what they want to be when they grow up. And so that's what going through the ICP profile will also help
Mm.
you do, because you'll end up getting clarity about, well, what do you want to be? right? It's like, oh yeah, I want to offer this service, but I don't want to offer this service. Well, that just means when you see one that's looking for that, you're going to refer them to someone who does do that function. Say, maybe I can help you with this part, but I can't help you with that part.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a really common thing is they just ask you for a thing that you can't do. There are demanding clients, right, that are that
Yep.
not a good match. But like I said, the three things: demographics, psychographics, and then problems. So you want to find a client that is demographically looking like your best clients, one that has kind of the same attitudes and perspectives that they do, and that has the problems that you solve. And so if they have those three things, you know, you got a winner there. If like they meet maybe they meet two of those, but they don't have any of the problems you solve, there's nothing you can do to really help that client, right? So
Yeah.
again, just spending a little bit of time on your ICP is going to go a long way in saving you time.
Exactly. Great stuff, James. What about this other area is the buyer's journey? This is one that I see quite a bit that we think on the sales side of things that the buyer's journey is my sales process, which is in some cases it's an outbound call, it's an appointment, then maybe trying to get interest into a demo, and then closing for a proposal, and then asking for the business. And it seems to me that people that do this are missing a lot of steps there that potentially on the buyer side of things. What's your thought on this?
Yeah, so to say it a little differently than how you just said it is the sales cycle or the sales process is very different than the buying process. You got to remember the customer is going to go through a set, and if that concept is new, I can just tell you what they are. At
Mhm.
first, the customers are unaware that they even have a problem. They're not really in the market. They're not shopping. And then they get in this awareness stage. And that at that stage, they're kind of asking themselves, hey, do I have a problem? Do I really have a problem here or not? And if they finally decide that they have a problem, then the next stage they go to is, well, how big is my problem really? I mean, is this big enough that I have to do something about it, or can I just let it slide? If they finally, if they decide, yeah, this is something big enough that I need to do something about it, then they'll think, oh, hey, what are all the different ways I could possibly solve this? Okay. Now that might include your category of solution, but it might not. For example, if your car gets in an accident and you need transportation, you don't necessarily have to buy a car. You could have a bike, or you could take the bus, or right, you could Uber, right? There's different ways of getting around. Those are alternate ways, right? So at this stage, the customer's not thinking about who's got the best car. They're thinking about, well, how can I solve my transportation issue? Right? I could carpool with my friend, right? There's lots of different ways to solve the problem. Once they've decided that a given solution is the right way. Oh, I think what I really need is a car. Then they're at the stage where most people like to spend their time selling, which is evaluate solutions. They're like thinking, hey, which car is the best one for me? Okay. After they think they've gone through that process, they will hesitate for a minute and they'll justify their decision. They'll say, whoa, I'm about to spend a lot of money on this. Is this really worth doing? Okay. And if you don't understand that that's part of the buying process, customers will look like they stall out at that stage because they're not really confident that dropping all this money on whatever investment they're going to make is really going to be worth it. So it's part of our job as salespeople, by the way, to solve that, to prevent that from happening. When you get to the defining problem stage, right, with the customer, you need to articulate how big the problem is. Help them know that, because if you've done that, by the time they get to justify a decision, they'll say, oh my gosh, this is a $250,000 problem and I can solve it for $50,000. This is a no-brainer. They'll spend 1 second in the justified decision stage. But if you haven't done that, then they're going to wonder about it. They're like, wow, is this really
Mhm.
worth $50,000? Because they haven't come to the full realization of the magnitude of the challenge that they're facing. So that's part of our job as salespeople and facilitators to help with that. And then the final thing is, all right, what's the best terms I can get? Right. And then I guess if there's one more stage out that it'd be like, as soon as they've decided they want you and it's you and you've closed, they want to say, I want to get started. Right. So those are all the different stages, right, of the buyer's journey. And one of the most common mistakes that I see relating to that is when the salesperson is trying to have a conversation with the customer in one stage, when the customer is actually in a totally different stage, right? So, and the most common example is the salesperson will be going on and on and on about their solution when the customer might still be asking them, gosh, do I really have a problem here? And here's the unfortunate truth is that when a salesperson speaks to a stage that's further along in the buyer's journey than where the customer actually is, then they come off as being pushy. Okay, even if it's unintentional, and it sticks deals. And so the golden rule of sales engagement is this: we meet the customer where they are, not where you are, not where you want them to be, but where they are.
But I have a
And
quota, James. I need this one for this month.
yeah, stop leaning into it, because if you start pitching further along the sales process, imagine this: you're not even sure that you have a problem, or that your problem's even big enough to solve. And then I lead with a, hey, I got a 50% discount on the thing I'm selling you. You're like, that seems so pushy to you, right? Because you don't even understand me yet. And so it's important that we just figure out where they're at. And so it's easy for me to say this. So everybody always asks, well, how do I know? How do I know where they're at in the journey? And the easiest way is just to ask them. And there's a lot of ways to ask. Whatever's comfortable for you is fine. But you could say, so tell me a little bit about where you're at in your buyer's journey right now. Or you could say, tell me a little bit about where you're at in your process, or where are you at in your evaluation process. And there's a whole bunch of examples in the book. But anything along those lines is going to tell you where they're at. And then you can serve them best by speaking to whatever stage they're at, right? So if they're at the stage where they know they got a problem, but they're not really sure how big it is, then you could say, well, why don't we turn over the back of an envelope and figure it out, right?
Mm.
And I can give you some coaching on. There's some ways to figure out how big it is. It's sort of kind of the business case side of whatever it is that you're selling. But on the back of an envelope with just 5 questions, you can actually figure out about how big the problem is, and that tells the customer right at that stage that is this worth solving, or is it not worth solving? And then that's going to advance you to the next stage, which is, okay, well, there's lots of ways of solving it. Which way should I do it? Now we're going to have a conversation about bicycles versus carpooling versus buses, right? Or whatever it is. And then you see, but you're going at their pace, not at your pace. It's when you start trying to push them faster than they're ready to go, that's when it starts feeling like manipulation to them. And
Yeah.
that turns people off.
Yeah. So once someone recognizes that they have a problem, does not mean that your solution is going to be what they say is what I need. Right. So
Bingo.
they've got choices. And so so they say, well, okay, I've got a problem. And now sometimes on the sales side of things is we feel like, well, you've got a problem, I've got the solution. So what's standing in the way, right? This very limited thinking for the close. It's like, well, why wouldn't you go ahead and solve this today? It's like, well, because I have options. And what you just described here on the modes of transportation, if we use that example, could be the same with a roof. It could be the same with, your HVAC. It could be the same with you put in the
Legal
problem.
services, anything. Yeah.
Yeah, you put it, and it's just because we have the problem, there are other things. So you mentioned there something about evaluating the solutions, right? Where that's going to take some time and say which of these makes the most sense for me.
And so that's where your job as a facilitator. And by the way, people often ask me, hey, what's your definition of sales? And the best word I can come up with that is you're facilitating a decision that is in the customer's best interest.
Yeah,
That
I
is,
so love that.
and so you need to know their goal before you can even you can't do any good facilitating unless you know what their goal is. What's the outcome that they're looking for? So you have to understand the dimensions of their problem. And sometimes it's fairly simple, right? I want a new roof, but you know what? There's lots of different kinds of roofs,
Right.
right? And so we need to understand what their goals are. Once we understand what that is, we can talk through with them all the different ways of solving that problem. And here's the good news. Okay. While it's super common for salespeople want to just jump to to their solution, and maybe that theirs is the one. If you do a really great job of helping the customer define their problem and go work through the options, they will prefer you. There's
Yeah.
data, right? So
Nice.
I'm not, there's data that backs this. If you just help them with the understanding, even if you don't even have to be the cheapest one or anything. And very often you'll be able to get a premium because you're the one that brought all the value to sort of enlighten their decision making. And so they'll prefer you. So that's where you can get a lot of juice out of improving your sales skills, is by getting better at helping the customer define what their problem is and work through the different options, and then facilitating that. If you do that, they'll work through each of the stages and you'll get there with them pretty quickly, actually. And
Yeah,
they'll have a
that's good.
preference for you, even if you're coming at a premium.
Yeah, this is so tied in with, providing value is beyond just selling a product or service. This is a great opportunity because most people who are selling something have experience of probably many different types of buyers, many different challenges that they had around the solutions or products and services you sell. And now you can tell stories. And I think one of the things I like is, this may not be for you right now, but let me help you with some of the things that I've learned, and what some of your options might be. And you take your sale or your product off the table to some degree, and just take the pressure off and say, I'm just here to help the person. And then when you bring it back, yeah, and this is an option and you're one of the options versus you've got to go with me, the neediness goes away, or the look of neediness, or that look of pushiness goes away. Thoughts?
100%. 100%. I'll just give you an example that happened to me. So I put solar on my house a few years ago. I had all these play outfits come in. It was a lot of money. I remember going, at the sales experience, right? And you can imagine how sensitive I am to observing how they go through their process, right?
Yeah, scary.
Yeah, and so I don't tell them. None of them know that there was one guy that actually knew who I was, but the rest, after we're done, my wife says this to me. She goes, you know, they're all super similar, but man, I really want to buy from that guy. I really like how he did that
Mm,
and went through it with us. And I'm like, that is exactly the reciprocity feeling that you're getting. So my advice is, Harry, is just what you said. When you go into the opportunity, don't go in with any kind of outcome in mind. Just go in thinking, how can I best help this person? How can I serve this person the most? If you do
yeah,
that and just help them get to their goal, then their natural preference will be for you, even if it comes at a premium. And by the way, the guy that was the best, he was not the cheapest, right? But still
right.
super happy with the solution. And I still have recommended that guy to several other people. And so that's his whole model. He just
Yeah,
goes great for what worked for one client. And then that client helps him get other clients. So if there's
yeah.
a secret to selling, that's it right there.
That's great. I've got some comments here from Dennis Champagne. Become the best assistant buyer by facilitating a decision in their best interest. And the buying experience is everything. So thanks, Dennis. And then Mike is asking a question. Why? I'm not sure I understand this question, but I'm going to read it. Maybe you understand it. Maybe we need clarification. But why is it better to show problems rather than opportunities?
I don't know that it is. So I will say this though. Um, because some people are opportunity driven and some people are problem solution. But statistically, people are about twice as motivated to move away from a problem
Oh, that.
than they
Okay.
are to move towards a outcome. And a
Mm,
common thing, a mistake that salespeople make is we are all goal-oriented creatures. That's why we're attracted to sales, right? And so we project our own personalities onto clients. And
mm,
so we're almost always selling upside and the positivity of it and all of that, when in reality, about two-thirds of people are actually just trying to avoid a problem.
mm,
And so it's important. I'm not saying don't include the upside. You definitely want to do that. But it's kind of important to explain to them, yeah, the common pitfall that people fall into when they evaluate a solution like this is they end up doing this, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then it gets kind of bad, right? And then you tell them the other part of the story about the good part. And then if you want to add a little extra juice, you're going to tell a story of an exact client that had that experience right at the end. But you can play both sides of it. You can play both the carrot and the stick. But the common mistake that salespeople make is they don't want to sell the negative part of it because we're positive creatures. And
mm,
so you got to just teach yourself. You can still frame the problem in a positive way. You can say, hey, here's some common problems that you're going to avoid, right? But then you're still telling them, oh, you could get this wrong and it could be costly if you get it wrong, right? So great question, Mike. But the truth is, about two-thirds of people are more motivated to move away from a bad thing than they are to move towards a good thing, and that is maybe an unfortunate commentary on society,
So true, though.
but it is true.
Yeah, I'm just laughing at this, and I'm thinking about the many, many deals over the years. And the ones that stand out was a crisis was happening, and now we need you. It wasn't the beautiful utopian world we promised in the sale. It was like, yeah, this broke. We need you now. And they finally made a decision. So it was finally the problem was we just overlooked it in a lot of those cases. It's like you're trying to paint a picture solving this problem, but it wasn't until they really felt the full force of a problem is when the need became where
Yeah,
they
and
took action.
that has some bearing on your cold calling or your outreach, that whatever type of outreach that you do, because you kind of want to talk about that sort of burning problem that they have, because they're most likely to act on that than they are to act on this. Because the long-term upside goals are more for long-term thinkers, and during a crisis, and we've all been through a lot of crises over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Um, they're looking for almost an immediate return. That, like, any long-term thinking kind of goes out the window. And so if they can't get a return inside of 3 months or 6 months, they're like, I'll just put that on the back burner for now. It's not that they're not interested, they are. It's just that it doesn't make the priority stack, right?
Right. Well, this is this is another reason deals get stuck is that we think because we're selling the product or service, we think that we are on top of mind with our buyers. Like, so we send an email maybe on Monday and we're trying to follow up on a process or something. They don't respond. Then we maybe send a follow-up email a couple of days later. Maybe we call and we leave a message and we feel like we're ghosted. How rude. And we should go all these, not everybody, I'm sure you don't, but we have a tendency to think that we deserve a response. Right? You owe me a response. I've done so much for you. So I'm chuckling through this, but there's stuff that comes up. So even though we were a priority, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I've been promised an agreement, a signed agreement. We're going to make sure this happens this week for you, and months later, you're still waiting for the signed agreement, and people disappear and go through stuff. But you got to think about what's going on in their world. They're not in business just to buy. If you're selling in the corporate world, they're not in business just to satisfy a sales rep's desire to sell something. They've got stuff going on, and we're not. Once we leave the room, pretty much they go back to their day doing the stuff that needs to get done. And sometimes we're going to get pushed to the back burner, unfortunately. What's your
Yeah,
thought?
let me give you some encouraging data on that, and then this just triggered a thought in my mind that
Okay.
I think your audience will find valuable. But the data is this: there was a study done in Wisconsin, grueling study, where they um they called everybody who had not responded, right? Okay, so you can imagine how long this took, and they asked them, what caused you to not respond, right? They tried to figure out what is the root cause behind no response. In the 90 percentile, they said, I'm still interested, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so mind blowing
Whoa.
answer.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
thought it was going to be something else, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, no, I'm still interested in this, actually. I just haven't been able to get to it. And I suffer from this constantly, because I have a lot of initiatives and I'm really interested in any creative ways that we can improve performance at our company. And so I get stuff, but I don't have time to respond to all of the stuff. And so um, it's challenging, but it should be a little encouraging that just because they didn't respond to you actually doesn't mean that they're not interested anymore. In fact, if you want to use those numbers, about 90% of the time they
Crazy.
actually still are. If they at least
Yeah.
rose their hand at some point, they're still interested, right?
Yeah.
But
Nice.
you know what this reminds me of, though, Harry, when you mentioned proposals that are sitting out there waiting forever. Um, it reminds me of a common complaint that salespeople have, is that after they deliver the proposal, suddenly all communication with the client mysteriously stops, right? And what I find, and I've surveyed a lot of salespeople on this, most salespeople conclude that there's either something wrong with the proposal or that their price was too high. but they don't
Mhm.
know because they never got to talk to the client, and so
Mhm.
they can't tell for sure, right?
Yeah.
And my experience is occasionally that's the case, but in my experience, that's not actually the primary cause. So I think this will be valuable for everybody on this call. Um, while it's true, multiple things can cause a client to go quiet on you, okay? But in this context, I can tell you that this particular problem, that is where you send a proposal and then suddenly they go quiet on you, can be primarily attributed to just one thing. Then there may be exceptions on this call that people are
Uh-oh.
going to say, oh, I don't do this, but I'm about to tell you what the biggest crime in selling is, and that is just emailing a proposal to a
Oh,
client,
geez, Louise.
right? And
Yeah.
so in most cases, the salesperson just simply emailed a proposal at the client's request without any sort of collaboration or any kind of review. And what I can tell you is that indiscriminately emailing proposals is an error in selling that has reached epidemic proportions. You see it across all industries. Nobody's immune to it. I'm guilty of it. I've done it in the past too. But let me tell you what happens, because I've used special software if you email a proposal, right? And it tells me where they're looking, how long they spend on each
Oh,
page,
okay.
all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you what happens when you email a proposal. They open it up, they go right to the price, where they sit there 90% of the time. 90% of their time is just spent looking at the page that has the pricing. Everything about your services and all this other stuff that you do, don't even see it. They don't
Yeah.
even see it. And so, I can say a lot, but the big question is, how do you fix that? How do
Yeah.
you keep that um, problem from happening? And my answer to that is never email a proposal again, okay? Without doing a review with the client first.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's how to do this. A lot of clients will definitely try to get you to email a proposal. So just expect that they're going to ask you, but don't do that. Okay. Clients don't really realize that. And I could go on at length, but I want to make sure we get to all the topics you want to get to. But they don't actually realize they're actually hurting themselves when they receive and review proposals that way. It really fosters very bad decision making. And I go into that at some length in the book. But so the next time you're asked to email a proposal, here's what I want you to say. Say, sure, I'll definitely email it to you. But before I do that, I just like to schedule a quick review together to make sure everything's accurate and that we're both on the same page and that we're meeting your expectations. When would be a good time to schedule that? And then just schedule it. Okay.
Yeah.
I promise you 95% of the time you will get an agreement with no pushback whatsoever. 1 in 20, right? The client will say, well, can you email me the proposal in advance of the meeting? And my answer to you is don't do it. Okay.
Mm.
Instead, say something like this. Say, I'll send the proposal as soon as we vetted it together to make sure it's exactly what you want. It's not a presentation, right? I
Yeah.
just want to review it together to make sure that we've gotten everything right. And then they'll capitulate. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're just making it kind of clear in a very diplomatic way that you're not getting the proposal unless we do a review together. Okay.
Yeah.
It is super uncommon, but maybe 1 in 100 times you'll get someone who'll still push back. If that happens, then I usually say something like, you know, I've had a couple really costly experiences where the misunderstanding in the proposal created a big problem. So I just don't offer proposals without a review. It's better for everybody, and that way nobody ends up getting surprised or disappointed. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that will get you 100%. But normally you just say, hey, when you want to schedule it, they'll schedule it. And then you'll always get it. And then when you get to be with that person, you will have an opportunity to go through every piece of it and sell every little minutia that's part of the proposal. And maybe the person you're talking to is the actual decision maker, but in a lot of cases, that person has to take it to somebody else
Mm.
and go get approval for it. So what you're doing is you're coaching them on how to sell all the different parts of the proposal. So when they go take it to their boss, they know how to sell all that. If you just email them the proposal, you know how that conversation is going to go. Yeah, it costs this much. That's about how
Yeah.
long that
Yeah.
conversation is going to go, right? So but I'm telling you, if you do what I just suggested, it will always work. You have all the cards. They really want to see your solution, and so the solution is just to schedule a time to review. And when you do that, you get a chance to sell every little piece of it. It'll allow you to see their responses in real time, right? So if maybe what if you got something wrong? Oh, they'll tell
Yeah.
you. Or maybe they say, oh, is there a way you could do this or can you do that? Great. Yeah, let's add it to the proposal. Now
Hmm.
they're invested in the solution because they help build it with you, right? So you don't want to make it a formal thing. Just say, hey, it's just a casual thing for us to go through it together.
Yeah.
But it'll make the client feel understood. It gets you valuable feedback on how your proposal works and gives you a chance to change it. If you just email it, you won't get a chance to change it because they won't call you back. They'll look at it and think, oh, I got the last useful piece of information I can from this sales guy, the price,
Yeah.
right? And then suddenly they don't need to call you. So the client themselves make better decisions when you do this. And that's probably the most important thing is we're just trying to help them achieve a goal. And if you don't spend a little time explaining what they're going to get and how it's going to happen, then how can they make a great decision? Right. But,
Yeah.
and I guess in this context, since we're talking about unsticking deals, doing it this way will prevent that particular stall from happening. Because when you've already sent the email at that point, um, after you've done a review, they already know exactly what they're expecting, what you're sending them, right? And so that will prevent that stall from happening. But it's when you send it and they think they got the last useful piece of information from you that they need, that's when they go radio silent. And that's very frustrating for us. The other thing that could be happening when that happens is that they're in the justified decision stage, and we didn't do a good job at the beginning explaining how big their problem was. So they can't figure out whether your $50,000 solves a $250,000 problem or not, because we never took the time to articulate how big the problem was. We didn't help them work through what the implications of their challenge is. So you need
Mhm.
to spend time there. So you can't really fast track the buyer's journey. It is possible that you can get through all those stages in an hour, depending on the type of sale that you have. But for complex sales, it could take a week or two to get through all those stages. It just depends. Yes, I've had clients where we did it for a year, right?
I,
For very
yeah.
large deals with lots of stakeholders. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then, there's so much to go on here. I love what you just said. James RJ says lack of follow-up is killer too. It's amazing how many people thank you for following up. So on this topic of the proposal, um, following up after the proposal has been emailed is one thing, because that's a challenge. But when you do what you described, and I've said this to many sales reps, if they are not going, I mean, first of all, we speak the language of what we sell, right? We know our terminology. We know it by the back of our hands. We know everything about what it is we do. The prospect may be seeing this for the first time, and as clear as you make it, it may not be clear to them. I mean, I thought I was so clear over the years, and then you get this question out of blue. It's like, did you,
were you listening? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Did you read the email I sent you? No, I'm just kidding. But you get the idea, right? So that is there. So we don't know how they understand our writing, and the way we put things together could be clear and logical to us, but we don't all think alike. So having them there guiding you through, saying, yes, this is clear. I understand this. They raise a question. We now start to see some skin in the game. All that's super helpful in getting to sale. So just want to touch on a couple of things about when people, maybe we do all the things that are right. We're talking to our ideal client profile. We've got people that are in the decision stage. They've justified the decision, or they now feel like they've got to make the selection. We've had proposals with them, and they still, I mean, can they still go dark on us, James?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Because
So
if they don't, I'm not very good. But yes, they definitely will still potentially go dark on us. And so you've got a few different tips without necessarily going through everything in the book. One that jumps out on me, on my side, is to be patient. If this is the first time they've ever made a decision like this for a product or service that you're offering, and it's substantial, sometimes that decision gets pushed back and they say, yes, yes, yes. And then they go, uh-oh, this is way more than we thought. We're not sure we're going to commit internally to the changes and so forth. And so sometimes that's going to take a little bit more time. It might, I mean, I've had it where they've taken over a year, like you've said. But what are some, so just having a patient mindset is helpful in this, and continuing to be a value provider for your prospect is one thought.
yeah,
What else comes to mind, or how you want to respond to that?
well, that's important, but it's also important not to misread. You could, for example, your intervention sometimes is appropriate to be patient. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say your house is flooding, right? Okay. And that's a big problem, right? I mean, you need to fix it because it's damaging your house, it's ruining
Yeah.
your basement, all this stuff. But then let's say that your house catches on fire. Are you going to wait and still fix the flooding, or are you going to put the fire out first? So it's important to remember that there are sometimes legitimate reasons why people wait, right? Why they stall out. And it, basically, any opportunity you're presenting to them, any business case is all about priority.
Yeah.
Meaning they want to know what is the best use of my time and money right now is the question that they're trying to answer. And there's ways you can answer that that will speed up your sales process and help you get through some stalls. But if they genuinely have a problem that is so big that has to be handled first, that's the right thing for them to do, right?
Right.
The right thing to do is put the fire out first so you won't have any house left to fix the basement, right, with the flooding. So it's important. And so in that case, it's really patience is the play. But it would be easy to look at a stalled deal and maybe think, oh, I just need to wait a little longer,
Mm.
and then nothing's happening. Okay, so it's kind of important to look at the signs of why your deal is stalled out, and there are some counterintuitive ones. And in fact, there's enough that on my webs on Unsticking Deals, you can go. It's free. Just go in there. There's a button that says I forget what it says, but you can download some resources. I promise you, there's no money involved.
Yeah.
Just click them. But there's a little questionnaire there, and you can just fill it out, and it'll actually tell you what the root cause of your stall is, and then it'll tell you what interventions you can use
Mm.
to go do it. And the book course goes into detail, but literally, if you're trying to figure out, hey, I got a stalled deal and I really need to close it this month because I got to hit quota, that's a great place to go. Is to go do a little homework on your stalled deal, and then it'll suggest some interventions. Being patient is definitely one, and an appropriate intervention, but at the same time, there may be other things you could do. For example,
Absolutely.
one of the biggest, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but one of the biggest things that happens in a sale that throws salespeople off, and entrepreneurs especially, um, is that we are all selling upside. That is, we're trying to say, you should change, you should change, you should change. And we're selling why they should be making that change, right? Well, what actually happens in a sale is about halfway through, they go, yeah, I think I should make a change. And then a really crazy thing happens. They switch. They start thinking, oh man, what if I do change? Okay. And so then what's happening is you've sold it. Okay. So they do want to change. Now what you're selling against is the risk that they're going to fail somehow.
Mm.
And so to address that, this is one of those ones that's kind of hard to read sometimes.
Yeah.
But what you need to do at that stage is you need to sell that they can't fail. That, right? You need to talk about your guarantees. You need to talk about how you're going to hold their hand. You need to show them your
Mm.
project plan, right? Whatever, there's different, and there's a bunch of suggestions in the book on how can I address this fear that they're going to fail? And their fear of failure is actually very high. It's about 2/3 of clients when they stall out. They're the reason that they're stalling out is because they're worried that if they make a choice, they're going to make a bad choice and it's going to make them look bad. And here's what the data shows. In most cases, they would rather just do nothing than to take a risk that they're going to make a decision that's going to turn bad.
Mm.
So you need to switch your selling from, hey, change, all the upside to starting to, hey, I promise we'll hold your hand, you won't fail, and then you're going to mitigate all of their risks. So that's an important philosophy change, right? Instead of selling, what you're just kind of do is you're kind of flipping to taking care of them and nurturing them, and say, hey, I promise I'm going to get you over the finish line on that. So that is, I mean, there's a way more detail, of course, in the book on that, but
Yeah.
that's basically a really foundational principle that's important to understand is at some point they get sold and then they're just worried about, oh my gosh, what if I do make this decision and I mess it up? What's going to happen?
Oh,
So,
so
so you're going to
good.
add some stuff to protect against that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about over the years selling technology, people said, or buyers have said, how much software we've bought that we've never used? You know, that will tell you that it gives you an idea that there's a lot of spending going on in businesses over the years that they were never implemented. And being able to tell a story where you helped someone actually implement something, if that's what you're selling, walk, taking them by the hand, getting to the finish line, that's super valuable because they buy us, but they don't necessarily know, are we going to be there post sale? And when you show up, I mean, if it's beyond you, right? If you're sending in a team and so forth, still checking in as the owner, still making a presence, that can just picking up the phone and calling someone and said, I know my team started working with you, can go a really long way in giving them peace of
Well,
mind.
let me add a little here. Do you know what the common thing is? If you ask a salesperson, hey, if a customer stalls out, right, and you can see they're kind of sold, they usually go back to trying to scare the customer into doing it, right? They're saying, hey, if you don't do this, bad things are going to happen.
Mm.
Okay. And that's the wrong lever because the thing that's keeping them from moving right now is fear.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? You're just throwing gasoline on their fear. So
Yeah.
don't do that. What you want to do is be you're going to offer some kind of a guarantee or some kind of risk mitigation so that they know that they can't fail. They're not worried about you. They're not worried about your product. They're worried about their own ability. That's the 2/3 I was telling you about.
Mm.
They're worried about their own ability to execute on the thing. I'll give you an example. I mean, I work in high ticket IT systems for healthcare. All right. And
Mhm.
so these systems can cost, $1 million, $2 million. It can cost a lot of money. And it's the kind of thing that if you make a mistake, it could be a career ending
Yeah.
decision. And so those kinds of fears are a big and legitimate concern of theirs. And so you have to say, oh, I've got a team that does all that. There's no way you can flub up the implementation because my team does the implementation for you, right? And then, or let's just say it's a simpler sale. Then you're going to talk about your guarantee and how if anything goes wrong, you'll be there within 24 hours, whatever your guarantee is.
Mhm.
But you're selling the guarantee now. You're not selling the fear that, oh, wow, if I don't put a roof on, it's going to destroy my whole house, because that actually doesn't unstick your deal.
Mm.
It's the fear that of the change. That's the thing that's preventing them. So you don't want to just throw gasoline on that. You just want to, nurture them into it. Say, oh, like, here's all the things I'm going to do to help you. And maybe you have to come up with a clever one that you haven't done before to make sure that this customer knows. One of the best things you can do that kind of ties back into your book, Harry, is if you have integrity and they recognize that you personally are going to stand behind whatever it is that you do, because you're just representing a company, right? I mean, there's all other kinds of people and moving parts and stuff. If they recognize you're going to be there, then that really that assurance. And I've had clients that have gone to different companies and I sell them over and over and over again because they know if James says he's going to do it, it'll happen, right? It doesn't mean it won't be, super smooth the whole time, right? I mean, maybe there's rockiness in there, but at the same
Sure.
time, they know that if I say it, then I'll make good on it. And
Yeah.
that's an important part. The integrity that you bring and the trust that you bring can go a long way towards alleviating that exact risk that we were talking about.
Yeah. So good. James, this has been awesome. I'd love to see if there's any other comments here from the group. But if we can open that up, Rowan, our super assistant here, if anyone wants to say something, we can definitely have them in. So James, where are people going to find you? Again, what's a good place to go?
So if you want unsticking deals, there's a special website just for the book. It's called,
Okay.
just spell it, unstickingdeals.com, and that's where it is. The book's on Amazon, so that's the best place to get it right now. And there is an audiobook for it. A lot of salespeople I'm more of an audiophile, so I'd rather listen to my book than to read it. So that's a great way to get it. If you want to follow me, then go to puremuir.com. It's PUREMUIR.com. And there's a bunch of resources there around perfect close and all of that stuff that are sitting there. And there's even a way right now, if you want that particular book, I'll mail it to you for just the cost of shipping, um, just so you can improve and see what it's like. But anyway, so those are the ways. I am very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn and follow me, I am happy to interact with you there. I have a lot of friends on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I'm a
I
fan
mean,
of
there's
James.
so much value that James offers. I highly recommend you find him. The Perfect Close is an incredible book. I love it. And Unsticking Deals, so much great advice in here. trying different things that go way beyond just being patient and waiting, right? There's stuff that can be done, and seeing the tips that James offers, you also have a guideline there for your ideal client profile.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
again, tons of value. Definitely want to look into that. So Unsticking Deals, find it, follow James Muir. He's the best. James, I think that may be it. Any final thoughts here that you might have?
It's just so great to be with you again, Harry. So let's do it again sometime. Love you. I love what you stand for. You and my values are virtually identical. So I'm really great to spend some time with your audience today.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much. I just love the science it's like you always have the data behind your statement. I don't know if you're carrying around notes where you say, here's the data on everything I believe, but to me, it's amazing. When you said 90% of the people, of people who have gone or have ghosted or appear to have lost interest, still say
Are
that
actually still interested.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that changed things
remarkable.
for me. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I know that they're just busy. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
This is a line I've said to sales reps over the years, is that they view us like the local pick a store, right? Where they view us like Walmart, that we're always going to be there. They don't need to respond because they know we're like Walmart. We're going to be around. And when they're ready, right, you try different things, but they take us for granted and that we don't have hurt feelings and so forth. But so there's no reason. I mean, we do sometimes feel a little bit hurt that someone hasn't responded, but we're taking it personally.
But it's a
Because
true
most of us
dynamic.
don't,
Yeah.
right? We have other priorities. Stuff comes up.
Yep.
So
Amen.
anyway, we could go on for a long time.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, great show. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. You're the best. Thank you.
Mm.
Thanks for listening to Sales Made Easy. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Also, you're invited to join the Facebook group Sales Training Selling with Dignity. Serve first, the selling will follow.